Welcome to the EMS Expense Preparation course. During this course, we will show you how to access and navigate within EMS and how to prepare and submit an expense report. There are 6 modules in the Expense Preparation course. We will have a brief overview of the new EMS. We'll discuss pertinent travel and expense policies that have changed, and you'll see how to create an expense report. In addition, we'll take a look at available report features, discuss the expense report approval process, and support options available to you. Let's begin this first module by getting you familiar with the application. Our goal is to identify the key features of the new EMS, to understand processing roles, and how to create an expense report. This course is designed to provide Yale employees with the skills and knowledge required to manage university expenses in a manner that adheres to Yale's financial management principles. The 3 guiding principles are setting up for success, getting it right the first time, and managing smart. The current system will no longer be supported by the vendor in 2010. Expense Management Solution, powered by Oracle iExpense, is a web-based Oracle application that's used to enter, process, and approve faculty, staff, and student employee expense reports and procurement card purchases. The new EMS will simplify processes, ensure compliance with Yale's T&E policies, and increase standardization and accuracy. This slide gives you a feel for the EMS homepage once you log in. From here, you can create an expense report, track reports you've submitted, update reports, and view notifications. In Module 3 of our training, you will have a chance to see how an expense report is created. When creating an expense report, you will see a page to enter general information. Roll your mouse over each feature to learn more. At the top of the screen, you will see the navigation bar, which allows you to search for expense reports, credit card transactions, and payments. Please note, if you need to dispute a credit card transaction, contact the credit card company directly. Don't click the Dispute Transaction button under the credit card transactions section, as it won't be properly routed. EMS offers a series of helpful features and benefits. For example, it allows you to see your progress as you enter information. In addition, you will enjoy the ability to withdraw and duplicate expense reports. If you are missing a required receipt, you will be able to fill out a missing receipt form directly in EMS. Finally, you will receive HTML formatted email notifications. There are several roles specific to the expense management process. The initiator, the person who incurred the expenses, has the option to either complete the expense report, him or herself, or delegate it to the preparer. The transmittal preparer prepares the expense report transmittal form on behalf of the initiator and transmits the information to the transaction preparer. The transaction preparer enters the expenses into EMS. The approver reviews the details of the report and then decides whether to approve or reject the report. Now that we've helped you get familiar with EMS, it's time to turn our attention to the travel and expense policies. At the end of this module, we'd like you to understand and comply with Yale's travel and expense policies and procedures. Yale's travel and expense policies are intended to ensure appropriate stewardship of Yale's resources and compliance with sponsor or donor restrictions. The information on subsequent slides will provide specific details and examples of policies. There are several policy changes that are important for you to know. First, all expense reports under $200 will automatically be approved by the initiator. This means that once the preparer has submitted the expense report, it will be routed for approval to the initiator. When he or she verifies that the expenses are accurate, additional approvals will not be required. Please note that both the QA Compliance Unit in the Controller's Office and business offices will be reviewing expense reports that are under the $200 threshold to ensure compliance. Second, personal expenses incurred while traveling on university business will not be reimbursed. See Guide 3301 GD.01 for a list of miscellaneous non-reimbursable travel expenses. In addition, certain expenditures must be categorized using the expense type unallowable. Alcohol charges on business meals no longer need to be allocated as unallowable unless the expenses are being charged to grant funds. It is important to note that per Policy 3201, due to safety standards for the university, furniture and fixtures must be purchased through SciQuest with our contract vendors or through purchasing services. Also, according to Policy 3220, purchase of restricted items, you may not use a credit card to purchase any of the restricted items. Violation of policy may result in appropriate disciplinary action. Finally, for expenses under $75, receipts are not required. When receipts are necessary, please use one of the three methods outlined on the screen to scan or fax the documentation. Please note that once the receipts are attached using one of the three processes above, the original receipts and cover sheets should be retained for 90 days after the end of the month in which the reimbursement took place. After the 90 days, the receipts should be shredded. To reduce the number of errors, there are a number of items you will need to check for when preparing an expense report as outlined on the screen. For example, be sure to include a sufficient business purpose that communicates why the expense is valid. It should respond to the 5 W's, the who, what, where, when, and why. Be sure to choose the appropriate expenditure type, avoiding the use of the miscellaneous and other categories. If you have questions about the charging instructions, please chat with your business manager and/or initiator cardholder for clarification. Finally, please keep in mind that it's critical to secure an exception to policy approval before incurring the expenses. Based on Policy 3301, all expense reports and supporting documentation should be submitted within 10 business days of incurring the expense or returning from the trip, whichever happens later. Expense reports should be approved within 7 calendar days from the date of receipt. There are 6 steps to accurately prepare an expense report. First and most important, you need to ensure all expenses comply with Yale's policies and procedures. Expense reports should be submitted within 10 business days of returning from the trip or incurring the expense, whichever happens later. please urge initiators to provide their receipts promptly. In addition, you will need to keep all personal expenses separate from business-related expenses. Be sure to use the correct PATAO and expenditure type. Finally, scan or fax the receipts and retain them in accordance with Yale policy. To learn more details about the key changes, click on the policies below. Be sure to review the key points on this slide. Let me point out an exception to the under $200 initiator-approved expense reports. If a receipt is required and is missing, the expense report will be routed for approval to the appropriate business office. On this slide, there are two important points that haven't been previously mentioned. First, the university does not provide reimbursement for travel and entertainment expenses of family members and others who accompany university employees on business. In addition, travel funded by federally sponsored grants and contracts is generally subject to the Fly America Act, stating that air travel must be booked on a U.S.-flagged air carrier. Regarding air travel, any international flight less than 5,000 miles one way must be booked in economy class with the lowest fare. For international flights over 5,000 miles one way, the traveler may book a business class ticket if funds are available and approved by the business office. Regarding lodging, please note that based on IRS regulations, a traveler who is visiting in a city, town, or state for more than 30 days is considered a resident of the state, and reimbursement rules change. In this case, one would only be eligible to receive up to 50% of the current published federal per diem rate for the location or the actual cost, whichever is less. Similar to lodging per diem, reimbursement of actual meal and incidental expenses for business trips greater than 30 days will be available at 50% of the current published federal per diem allowance for that location. In addition, regarding group meals, the cost of group meals should be $100 or less per person, including tax and tip. Pre-approval of meals in excess of $100 per person is required. This completes the Travel and Expense Policy module. You should now have a solid understanding of the changes in travel and expense policies and understand the items you need to pay attention to during the preparation process. Now that you're familiar with EMS, including the travel and expense policies and procedures, it's time to prepare an expense report. In this module, you will learn how to log into EMS and how to create and submit an expense report. It is important to gather the receipts and information from your trips and other business-related expenses. When ready to prepare an expense report, log into EMS to create and submit it and attach the required receipts. Now that we've outlined your specific responsibilities as a preparer, let's take a look at the EMS expense preparation demo. Over the next several minutes, we will show you how to complete an expense report using EMS, the new online submission system. As we review the process to create an expense report, we will discuss important information about travel and expense policy changes you will need to be aware of. To access EMS, navigate to Yale's uPortal and click the EMS link. In addition, make sure your pop-up blocker is turned off before proceeding. To access the system, enter your NetID and password and click Login. You will see Oracle e-Business Suite at the top of the screen. Click on Internet Expenses from the Responsibilities list. You will now see the home page for Oracle Expense Reports, known as Expenses Home. There is a menu bar at the top of the screen which allows you to navigate to Expense Reports, Credit Card Transactions, Access Authorizations, and Payment Search. Below that, the screen is divided into 3 major sections that provide information and allow you to take action. Track Submitted Expense Reports allows you to see the status of reports you have already submitted. You can view the submittal date, amount, and purpose. In addition, you have the ability to duplicate or withdraw an expense report. Update Expense Reports allows you to make changes to a saved, rejected, or returned expense report. Notifications alert approvers to expense reports that require action. To begin your expense report, click Create Expense Report. There are several steps to enter information for an expense report. At the top of the screen, you will see a progress bar that shows you where you are in the process. Currently, we are in the process of entering general information. The first step in the process is to select the person for whom the expense report is being created. If you are preparing the expense report on behalf of a colleague, you will be able to select their name from the Name drop-down menu. If you are preparing your own expense report, your name should default, or you can choose it. You will then enter the ER name. The name should be distinct enough for you to distinguish this expense report from others. It is important to note that a concatenation of the ER name and business purpose appears on account holder and other financial reports. You should check with your departmental business office to determine whether the department has a defined convention for these 2 fields to provide account holders with clear information about the expenditure. In addition, you will need to enter the specific start and end dates for the business expense. To choose the dates, click on the calendar icon to the right of the start and end date fields. A calendar will display, and you will choose the appropriate date and month for the start and end dates. The start and end dates you select on the screen should reflect the dates of all expenses included in the expense report. Alternatively, you can type in the information by using the DDMONYYYY format, a 2-digit date, the first 3 letters of the month, and the 4 digits of the year. Next, we will need to enter the business purpose for the trip or expense. As outlined in the Business Purpose Job Aid and Policy 3301, a valid business purpose must be shown for each trip, including supporting documentation, to validate the need for travel. The business purpose should include who, what, where, when, and why the expense was incurred. Finally, you have the option of entering the VIP number. A VIP number is a 10-character alias that is linked to specific university charging instructions. Each VIP number is associated with one individual and one PTAO. If you choose not to enter the VIP number, you will be able to enter the full PTAO later on in the process. On the Search and Select VIP screen, enter search criteria beginning with VIP and the beginning digits if you know them. Click Go and you will see a list of VIP numbers that contain your search criteria. Scroll through the list until you find the desired VIP. Choose the Quick Select icon. The number will display in the VIP field on the Create Expense Report page. Alternatively, if you know the VIP number, you can enter it in the field without using the search process. Click the Next button to proceed to the next screen. If you have used your P-card on University Business, the second screen of EMS will allow you to select the credit card transactions to be included in the expense report. However, if you have not used your P-card, you will be automatically routed to the Cash and Other Expenses screen. In our example, we will select credit card transactions to be included in the expense report. As you are completing your expense report, feel free to click the Back button at any time to return to the previous section of your report. All of your P-card transactions are automatically fed from MasterCard into the application, simplifying the process to create an expense report. EMS also allows you to view your credit card transactions before submitting your expense report by clicking the Credit Card Transactions tab at the top of the screen. Select the appropriate transactions by clicking in the Select box next to the transaction date and then click Next to continue. When required, please view the Level 3 transaction details. Note that if you have more than one P-card account, please ensure that you have selected the appropriate card by using the drop-down menu next to the account numbers. In Step 3 on the progress bar, Credit Card Expenses, we will need to provide specific details for the transaction selected in the previous screen, including selection of the correct expense type. First, we will choose the expense type from the drop-down menu. Next, we will enter a justification in the item comment field. The information in this field should be robust enough to fully describe the reason for the expense. When the credit card expense also includes personal expenses, for example, you had an in-room movie or a health club fee, you will need to enter specific information about those charges so that you will only be reimbursed for the business portion of the expense. Be sure to refer to Policy 3301 for the full list of travel expenses that are not reimbursable. Click the detail icon for the hotel transaction in order to itemize a personal expense. Click Itemize. You will need to subtract the amount of the expense to be itemized from the itemized receipt amount. In this example, we are subtracting $15 from the original receipt amount. After subtracting $15, our new itemized receipt amount is $249. It is important to note that itemizing and allocating expenses are two different actions. Itemizing includes separating personal expenses from business expenses, which we did in this example. If you need to split an expense between multiple potatoes, you will do so using the Allocate functionality later in the process. When all the information has been entered, click Return to go back to the expense report. Next, we will click the detail icon for the business meal at the Boulder Cafe to add additional information. Your name should appear in the Employee Name field. Click the flashlight icon to search for and add other Yale employees who attended the meal in addition to yourself. To search by employee name, enter the employee's last name in the field and click Go. After locating the employee's name, click the Quick Select icon. The name of the employee you selected now appears in the Employee Information section. Click Add More Rows to enter non-Yale employees who also attended the meal. Enter the non-employee's name. Then enter his or her employer. Click Return in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen to go back to the expense report. Please note, receipts are not required for any transaction where Level 3 transaction data is available at any amount. This information will only be available for airfare expenses. If Level 3 transaction data is not available and you're missing a receipt for an expense of $75 or greater, you will need to fill out a missing receipt form. You will be able to do this for a cash expense later in the demonstration. Click Next to continue. Step 4 on the progress bar, Cash and Other Expenses, allows entry of out-of-pocket expenses. Be sure to include the date, receipt amount, expense type, and justification. 3 subtabs on the Cash and Other Expenses screen show the following types of expenses that can be entered: receipt-based, per diem, and mileage. First, enter any receipt-based expenses. Please note that receipt-based does not mean a receipt is required for all items. Remember, receipts are not required by federal or Yale University policy and should not be submitted or retained for expenses less than $75. To enter a receipt-based expense, first click on the calendar icon to select the date the expense was incurred. Then enter the receipt amount. Select the expense type. Enter a description of the expense in the item comment field. Click the Update button. This will populate the reimbursable amount column with the appropriate values. In our example, you also incurred an expense of $80 for a conference fee. Because the expense is greater than $75, a receipt is required. You do not have the receipt in your possession and will need to click the Details icon to fill out the missing receipt form after entering the expense in the Receipt-Based Expenses tab. Please note, missing receipts will be indicated at the individual expense line item. When you are ready to attach the receipts you have in your possession, you will do so at the header level. You will see how this is done later in the demonstration. Missing receipts require review and approval by either the Department Business Office or the Controller. Missing receipts between $75 and $200 are reviewed by the Department Business Office. Missing receipts over $200 will be reviewed by the Controller's Office. Click the Details icon. Check the Original Receipt Missing box. Click on the Add button. The missing receipt form displays where you will be able to enter an explanation of why the receipt is missing. The first step is to enter a description of the expense. Select Missing Receipts Declaration as the category. Next, select the text box radio button. Enter an explanation of why the receipt is missing and click Apply. Now we're ready to return to the expense report. Now we're ready to enter Per Diem Expenses. Select the Per Diem Expenses tab. Per diem refers to a federally established daily rate for meals for which employees are entitled to reimbursement. It is important to note that if you are entering departmental per diem, it should be entered on the Receipt-Based Expenses tab. You will select Departmental Per Diem as the expense type. If you are entering regular per diem, you will enter it here on the Per Diem Expenses sub-tab. Click the calendar icon to enter the date of the expense. Select the start date from the calendar. Then select the expense type. click the flashlight icon to search for your destination. Type your destination in the field. Then click Go. Use Quick Select to choose the appropriate location. Then enter a description of the expense in the Item Comment field. We will also need to enter the number of days for the per diem. Now we will click the Calculate button. Please note there may be occasions when you are traveling on business and meals are provided for you. When this is the case, we will need to click on the Details icon to add additional information. Check the meals that were provided by clicking in the appropriate box. For example, if you were at a conference and lunch was provided on August 27th, you would click in that box. Now click the Recalculate button. The deduction of $13.80 for lunch on August 27th is reflected in the reimbursement summary. When all information is entered, click Return to go back to the Cash and Other Expenses screen. Now we are ready to enter any mileage expenses that have been incurred. Please note that Google Maps is the university recommended mileage calculator. Access Google Maps at www.googlemaps.com. To begin, select the Mileage Expenses tab. Click on the calendar icon. Then choose the start date. Select the appropriate expense type. Then enter a mileage description. We will also need to enter the distance traveled. We will now use the same process to enter mileage for our return trip. Next, click on the Details icon for each line item to enter additional required information. Enter the location from information. Then enter the location to information. We then click Calculate Amount. Now click Return to go back to the Mileage Expenses subtab. We will follow the same process to enter specific information for the second line item under mileage. We will click on the Details icon. The reimbursable amount for each line item will now display. Click Next to continue. Step 5 on our progress bar is Expense Allocations. All of the expenses you entered will now require allocation to the appropriate account Pateo. If you selected a VIP on the first screen, these fields will be auto-populated. Otherwise, you will need to enter the values. Our example only requires the use of one Pateo. However, if you need to split an expense across multiple Pateos, you would click the Update Allocations button, enter the percentage of the split, and the Pateos involved in the split. Click Next to continue. The last step in the preparation process is to review the information you entered and verify that it's accurate and complies with Yale's policies and procedures. Our goal is to reduce the amount of rework on expense reports. There are 2 ways to attach receipts. You may choose to submit your required receipts by clicking the Add button. After clicking the button, you will proceed to provide a description of the receipt and attach it to your expense report, as we'll demonstrate in a moment. This is the preferred method for attaching receipts in iExpense. Also, you can choose to submit your receipts via fax, where you will send them after clicking Submit. If a receipt is required, it will be indicated with a check in the Receipt Required box. If you previously noted that you were missing a required receipt, a checkbox will appear in the Missing Receipt box. When reviewing your report, ensure the amounts for personal expenses, business expenses, and reimbursable expenses are correct. Now let's walk through the process to attach the receipt. We'll start by clicking Add. On the Add Attachment screen, we will need to enter a description of the expense. Then we'll choose Receipts from the Category drop-down menu. To attach the receipt, click on the Browse button. Double-click on the appropriate file, or click on the file and then click on the Open button. Click Apply in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Now click Save to save your changes. We'll review the expense report for accuracy and compliance. Please be sure the reimbursement amounts are correct. Then click Submit. After submitting the expense report, you will receive a confirmation page and ER number associated with this report. This page should be printed and included when you scan and fax your receipts to 436-9750. The expense report will not be processed if the receipts are not received. It is important to note that you do not need to fax your receipts if you attach them directly to your expense report. Now it's your turn to create an expense report of your own. Read the text on the screen, which provides guidance on the expenses you will be entering. Click Play to begin this exercise.